Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? First of all, tonight, Hawk's Nest. We will be streaming on my channel tonight. Should start at about 6 o'clock Pacific. So we're going to be talking more about these rookies. We're going to really try to dive deep into what these players are, what they can do, what makes them special. It's going to be kind of similar to what I'm talking about in this little mini series of videos, but with a second perspective on it as well. So hopefully, the additional perspective of another person who is studying these players very deeply and really digging into what they can do and what they have to offer will mix things up. But yeah, tonight we're going to go for however long it takes. We're going to talk about some of our top rookies. And basically, we're going to try to get to the bottom of what we can reasonably expect from this crop of players. Because this is important, right? Nailing this draft is important. And I think that it's very crucial that this team finds a way to come away from the Wilson trade and the decision to move on from Wilson in general with a good foundation in place. That's the point. Otherwise, if you don't, then of course you may as well have just kept him because at least it would have been a little more fun to watch, right? So we're going to dig deep into it. We're going to really talk about what these players are bringing to the table. And I hope to see you there. We'll talk a little bit about some of the scheduling stuff as well because we learned a little something over the last couple days about the Seahawks 2022 schedule. Kind of cool. But yeah, more rookie talk tonight, 6 o'clock p.m., my channel, with the Hawk's Nest. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Boye Mafe. And like I said, I've talked about Boye Mafe before. He was one of my favorite guys in this draft. I definitely went into him in my edge rusher video. I talked about him a lot in the lead up to the draft because he was a guy I was prioritizing as a second round target. He was a late riser. He went from a guy who some people thought was lucky to be a fifth round pick to a guy who some people thought was going to be a first round pick. We were fortunate enough to get him at 40, and I have spent a lot of time on him, but now that we have him, I want to really try to go deep here. Yeah, again, I don't have enough time to go super deep into every single draft prospect when I have to cover hundreds. But now that I have the opportunity to cover less than 10, it's something I can dig deeper into. Okay, so Boye Mafe played for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and he is an edge rusher. He is an edge defender. He's either a defensive end in a 4-3 or an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I think he could do both. I think he probably projects to 3-4 outside linebacker a little better, but I think that he has the ability to give you both sides. Now, one of the drawbacks of Mafe that some people have brought up is that he is a little older, but this is a COVID draft class. A lot of these guys are a little bit older than you would like because they stayed back an extra year because of COVID. So Mafe's 23. He's going to turn 24 in, I think, November. So midway through his rookie year or so, he's going to turn 24. That's not ideal. It's not. I wish he was a couple years younger. Because here's the thing. Despite the fact that he's older, the draw of Boye Mafe is not so much his production as it is his potential. When you hear those kinds of things, you would prefer the player is like 21. However, I'm going to continue to repeat this. Mafe is not a guy who's been playing football for 10 plus years like some of these players. He's not a guy who grinded through all of high school, all of college, and even before then. In the case of a lot of these players, they played Pop Warner, they played Pee Wee. Mafe was, I believe he was actually born in Nigeria, and football is something that he's been playing for several years now, but he doesn't have the experience that a lot of these draft picks have. So it's a little bit of a special case with him, I think. As for his measurables, his actual size is pretty ordinary. His height is 6'4", so 47th percentile, right near the middle. His weight is 261 pounds, 39th percentile, so slightly below average, which makes sense if he's going to be an outside linebacker. Those guys are typically a little lighter. His arms are 32.6 inches, 17th percentile, so interestingly enough, he has some of the shortest hands of, or not one of the shortest, but very short hands compared to other players that have gone through the draft process that play edge. To be clear, these percentiles are comparing him to other players who are edge defenders, be that end or outside linebacker, depending on their eventual landing spot. His hands are average for an edge, 9.9 inches, 49th percentile. Where Mafe really stands out would be his athleticism. And brace for impact on this. These are some monstrously good measurables in terms of what he can do as an athlete, and this is what makes Mafe so special as a prospect. His 10-yard split on his 40-yard dash was 1.59, the 87th percentile. Very few edge players that have gone through the draft process have had a 10-yard split better than 1.59. But his 40 time, when he actually builds up to full speed and is able to run over an extended period of time, 4.53, is straight up one of the best ever measured at the combine, the 97th percentile. Only 3% of edge players that have passed through the draft process in recent memory are better or as good as Mafe's 4.53. So Mafe's 40 time, at least in that area, is one of the best that you will find at this position. From year to year, there might be one, maybe two players in the whole draft that are able to top this 40 time from the edge position. His vertical jump, 38 inches, 90th percentile, and his broad jump, 125 inches, 91st percentile. What that indicates is that he's very explosive, and those kinds of things are going to parlay very well in being able to quickly get around offensive linemen, quickly get around blockers, and make plays to sack the quarterback, bring down the ball carrier in the backfield, etc. So in terms of his explosive ability, his ability to get off the line, his ability to just use his athleticism to make plays one way or the other, he's off the charts. And I this is what made him a second round pick. It wasn't his production, it wasn't his size, it wasn't his age, it wasn't any of that. It was his 10-yard split, 40 time vertical jump and broad jump. He is an incredible athlete. Okay, so now let's talk about his career a little bit here. It's a little sparse because, again, this is a player who is about potential, not production. But let's take a look at what we can. In 2017, he redshirted, didn't play at all, I believe. 2018 was the first year he actually played. He appeared in 10 games. I don't believe he started any games. They were easing him in slowly. He recorded stats in 6 games, and he didn't record that many stats. Very, very minimal impact on the defense. His best game of the year was actually the bowl game that Minnesota played in that year against Georgia Tech. I actually remember watching this game. Mafe had his best game of the year with 6 tackles. So he wasn't making a big impact as an edge rusher yet. He wasn't doing a lot of stuff to disrupt plays in the backfield yet. But with that bowl game, he started to kind of put his footprint on the Minnesota defense. I remember watching this bowl game, and I believe Minnesota dominated it. In 2019, he started to make a bigger impact on the team, but it was still kind of a slow process. I believe Mafe had only played a little bit of high school football, so it made sense that he needed a lot of development. But in 2019, he appeared in all 13 games that Minnesota played. He recorded stats in 7 games, so not a lot of snaps still, but he did start to make put a bigger footprint on defense in some of these games. He had a game against Georgia Southern with 3 tackles, tackle and a half for loss, and a sack. And then he had a game against Rutgers where he had 4 tackles, which was his season high that year. So it's a slow growth, but things are starting to come along. And in 2020, he was poised to have a breakout season, and then he only played in 6 games. Obviously, 2020 was the weird year for college football. A lot of fluky aberrations happened because of COVID, and it was hard to learn a lot. But he played in 6 games. He recorded stats in all of them, so he was starting to play more snaps in each game. Some of his best games were 4 tackles, 1 pass deflection, and half a sack against Maryland, 6 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble against Illinois, and 7 tackles with 1 for loss against Wisconsin. His effort in 2020 actually got him the All Big Ten honorable mention, so he was recognized as being one of the better players in the conference, and he also made the academic All Big Ten team. So he was starting to get recognized a little bit, but it wasn't until 2021 that he actually did enough to really start turning heads. So 2021 is kind of the year that we really need to focus on here. He started in 9 games and appeared in 12, and he recorded stats in 11 of those 12 games. Some of his best games included 2 tackles for loss and 2 sacks against Colorado. He had 3 tackles with 2 for loss and 2 sacks against Bowling Green, 5 tackles with 2 for loss, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble against Purdue, and 4 tackles and 1 sack against West Virginia in Minnesota's bowl game that year. And for his performance this year, where he had 7 sacks and 10 tackles for loss, and I believe 34 tackles, he earned academic All Big Ten again. He made All Big Ten second team, so he was recognized as one of the best players in the conference. And after the season was over, he also went to the Senior Bowl and got awarded with Player of the Game honors for what he did in the Senior Bowl. So he impressed a lot of people at that game. His PFF grade overall on the season was 80 flat, and he recorded a grand total of 42 quarterback pressures on 257 pass rush snaps. So one thing that I do want to draw attention to now, because I did it with Cross in the positive, and this has to be, if we're being fair here, we have to point something out here. If you take a look at Mafe's better games, they mostly came against lackluster teams, right? In 2018, he had a pretty decent game against a decent Georgia Tech team. In 2020, he had a good game against Wisconsin. He had a good game against West Virginia in what I believe was the Minnesota Bowl game. But none of these performances, you may have noticed, were up against the better teams Minnesota played. Now, Minnesota did not play very many games against really good opponents. Across the last 3 years of Mafe's career in Minnesota, which is when he was actually playing a even somewhat significant amount, Mafe appeared in a grand total of 31 games. Only 5 of them were against teams that ended up ranked at the end of the season. Iowa 3 times, Auburn, and Ohio State. And that has to be a little bit of a concern here. Now, the good news is he was player of the game at the Senior Bowl, which is a game in which you are going up against some of the best players in college football and guys who are physically ready to take on pretty much anything. So he did prove on that level that he can compete against the best. But when it came to his games in college football, you can see, like, he has a big game against Bowling Green, big game against a bad Purdue team, big game against Colorado, big game against Maryland. So these are not elite competition that he's going up against when he's having his best games. Nevertheless, in 2021, he was able to, across 12 games, average about 3.5 pressures per game. And obviously that's going to be biased towards the weaker competition he played, but he was still able to leave his footprint on games that were against competent opponents, and in a couple of cases, really good opponents. Okay, so now that we have some understanding of what we are dealing with here in terms of Mafe's performance over the years, this is a guy who is all about the athletic ability more than the production. He was productive in 2021. 7 sacks and 10 tackles for loss in 12 games is good. He does bring some stuff to the table there, but we are talking about an athlete. So now that we've gone over what he actually accomplished in his Golden Gopher career, let's talk about the more exciting part. Not the stats, not the past performance, but what he might be able to do going forward now that he's got some experience playing the game under his belt and is about to enter the NFL. So here's the stuff that I can say about Mafe in the positive. Obviously, with those athletic scores that I showed, the testing scores, he's extremely explosive. The ball gets snapped, and he's a bullet getting into the backfield. He's absolutely going to be able to win some battles just with his speed around the edge. I mean, this 10-yard split, the 40 time, the broad jump, the vertical jump, this paints the picture of a guy that any offensive lineman is going to have their hands full with when they're trying to speed rush you on the edge. But another really nice thing about Mafe, if you watch his tape, he's really good at using his hands to push offensive linemen off of him. He's really good at like mixing it up a little bit when he's rushing around the edge, where he'll do a little stutter step and then use his hands to just kind of shed the tackle to get around him. He had a good variety of swim moves and shed moves to get off the blocker. That's one of the things that you like about him. Technically, he does have the ability to use his hands to win battles against offensive linemen, which you absolutely need. It can't just be all about speed. You need to be able to mix it up a little bit. You need to be able to throw some wrinkles into your pass rush repertoire. And based off what Mafe did in college football, he does have a good understanding of how to use his hands. He's also got significant upper body power. He's somebody who can convert power to speed very well, or speed to power very well. He's able to use his upper body strength to win battles sometimes. Early in Mafe's career, Minnesota actually played him inside every now and then. I think he was aligning near the B gap sometimes, and not a lot, but he was doing some of those things that we used to do with Michael Bennett. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it in the NFL. That might be a little too much to ask. But it does show that he has the ability to utilize his upper body power and be a little bit more of a strength player instead of a speed player in those occasions. He's good at utilizing jab steps to trick the offensive lineman. If you watch his tape, you're going to see a fair few jab steps to get offensive linemen out of position or off balance, and then he can use his speed to take over from there. Like I said, he converts speed to power very well. He's also very effective weaving through traffic, getting through a crowded area to get to the ball carrier, be it a quarterback or a running back. If you can get him off a blocker, and we'll get to that part of it in a second here, but he's good at weaving through traffic to get to the ball and make a play on it. He's got great lateral movement. He can move laterally really well, and when he needs to stop the run, especially on those like cutback runs where the running back tries to cut back, he can do that stuff well. He's also really good at quickly tackling a ball carrier after shedding a block. He goes from shed to tackle very quickly. If he's engaged with a blocker, he sees the ball carrier and he manages to get off the block, his ability to quickly transition to tackling is very, very fast. He's a good tackler overall, I would say, actually. Occasionally, Minnesota did utilize him in man coverage against running backs, and he did okay. Not amazing. There are going to be some difficulties getting Mafe to excel in coverage, which he is going to have to do some of as an outside linebacker in a 3-4, but he did show some ability to do those things in man coverage against running backs, which is promising because we've seen the issues that we have sometimes with these linebackers that can't cover on this team. It's been a struggle. He's also a very high effort player. You will see him chasing down plays that are nowhere near him. You'll see him 30 yards down the field trying to chase down a ball carrier to save a play. He's somebody who is going to give you maximum effort until the whistle blows. He's great crashing the backside against the run. Like I said, that thing about him being able to use his lateral movement to stop the run, those cutback blocks where a running back is going right and then all of a sudden he cuts left, Mafe's good at crashing the backside to take away that lane. So Mafe is not overall a great player against the run, but in some areas he is able to add value. He was good at chasing down blocks, running backs from the weak side. If they were running away from him, he was good in pursuit. So he is giving you some value there just based off what you saw in college. So it's not all bad there. But there are some concerns with Mafe, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Boye Mafe is one of the guys we drafted this year, maybe the only guy who I would say is a significant bust risk. I don't think these other guys we drafted will bust, either because I believe in them, I believe in their floor, or we drafted them so late you can't really bust. Like, Tariq Woolen can't bust in the 5th round. Mafe could bust, and let's talk about some of the reasons why that might be. So, the first thing you will notice with him, and I saw several other scouts that agreed with this, was that sometimes he has these false steps in his get-off, where sometimes his get-off on the snap is very fast and he's just exploding into the backfield, but sometimes he takes these, like, unnecessary little steps. It's just a consistency thing, and those false steps are going to slow him down, make him easier to block, and give the quarterback more time to get the ball out. So that has to be worked on. Sometimes he's a little inefficient in the way that he moves. Sometimes it just seems like he doesn't move as fluidly as you would like. Obviously, he's capable of moving very fast, but sometimes he's a little inefficient to get where he needs to go. He hasn't yet picked up the instincts of a top pass rusher, where he just kind of feels like where he needs to be, where he needs to go. You know, the instinct to know when the quarterback's about to try to climb the pocket and try to take that away from him. The instincts to know what kind of move to use. If you look at the elite pass rushers in the league, they have these things. Mafe hasn't shown that yet. Now, again, he hasn't played the game of football for as long as a lot of these guys. He could still pick it up. But as of right now, I think you can say that while he's very athletically inclined, his instincts as a pass rusher need some work. He can get caught off balance sometimes. He can get a little aggressive and end up in an awkward situation where he can get put on the ground, where he can be completely taken out of a play. As a playmaker, he just has some general inconsistency. That's how I would put it overall. His get-off is often great, but sometimes he's got those little extra steps in his get-off that just slow him down and make him easier to deal with. He does some really nice stuff in the pass rush, but sometimes it just seems like he doesn't have good instincts on where to be and how to get to where he needs to go. These are things that can be fixed, almost certainly, but will they be? Sometimes in the run game, he can get stuck on blockers. Seems like once the blocker gets attached to him, he has a hard time shedding him. Now, once he sheds him, he does a good job. Once the shed happens, he's good at quickly going into his tackle. He's good at weaving through traffic. But once he gets engaged with a blocker, it can be hard for him to shed it to actually make that play in the run. And in general, he needs some technique cleanup in how to play the run. He just gets caught out of position a little bit. He's, like I said, the ability to shed blockers is going to be key. And I don't know if he's ever going to be an excellent run defender. I do think that he's going to be good at some things. It kind of reminds me of like Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson, great against the run when it's run away from him. But when it's run towards him, he can struggle a little bit. So there is some stuff to work on here. There is some potential for downside for sure. I don't think Mafe is guaranteed anything in the NFL. Like, to me, Cross is guaranteed to at least be a competent starter barring injury. Abraham Lucas, same thing. Competent starter barring injury. Boye Mafe, you watch the tape, you see the good hands, you see how explosive he is off the snap, you see some of the power, you see the abilities to do great things, but you also see a lot of holes in his game. And that's what I got to say about Boye Mafe. Again, no film study in this video. I may look to do something like that on Twitch at some point because Twitch will actually let me do it. But for the moment, that's what I'm going to say about Mafe. Let me know what you guys think. Again, catch the stream tonight. Hope to see y'all there. Go Hawks. And that's my take on Boye Mafe after a deep dive.